let me kick things off. I'll just kind of do a quick panel intro, and we'll dive into some questions. So we have this wonderful panel we've gathered here. This is inspired in part from an AWE panel that several of the guests here were participating in back in June timeframe, I guess. And there's been just such wonderful announcements, such media announcements from both Meta and Snap recently about the recent AR glasses projects that they're working on. Not quite products necessarily, but projects. So we thought we'd gather this panel of experts together and talk through what we've recently seen from them. My name is Jason McDowell. I'll be the moderator for the discussion here, participating here in bits and places as well. On the side, I'm the creator and host of the AR Show podcast for the last 6 years or so. We've had the pleasure of interviewing most of the folks we have on the panel here today. I'm also a CEO coach and advisor for deep tech type CEOs, and I'm also working my own battery technology project on the side. Those are three very different things, but they keep my mind very engaged, and I love it. Let me turn it over to the panelists here to introduce themselves, starting with Jerry.
Hi, I'm Jerry Ellsworth from Tilt5. Check us out at tilt5.com. We're about social AR gaming with low-cost AR headsets.
David.
So my name's David Vanelli. I have a company called Pulsar. We do consulting for big companies, small companies, startups for hardware, AR headsets, etc.
Bradley.
Hi, I'm Brad Lynch, also known as Sadly It's Bradley. I'm the weird VR guy on this panel. I've been doing a lot of grassroots analyst stuff of trying to figure out what VR companies are working out in the future. But I also work full time as a product manager at a VR accessories company called EOC VR.
Nice. And Carl.
Hi, I'm Carl Gutag. I run the blog called KG on Tech, Carl Gutag on Tech. And the website, unfortunately, a mistake I made really early on was the website is www.kgutag.com. Hopefully you can find it if you study this stuff. So that's about it for me.
Let's set the stage and talk about these two perennial innovators that we have in the AR space. And Brad, I know you've been following Meta very closely for a very long time because, of course, they're the dominant player also in the VR space. But these two players, Meta and Snap, they've announced and demonstrated these latest efforts of theirs to build a set of see-through AR glasses that incorporate displays in each eye. So maybe, Carl, you can help kind of get listeners onto the same page here as we kick off. What are see-through AR glasses, and how are they different from the MR devices from Apple, Meta, and others?
Okay, well, I tend to talk about it as optical AR versus pass-through or camera AR, or mixed reality, I should say. And I oftentimes will say AR tends to imply that, and you get into all kinds of people quibbling over definitions, but for the sake of discussion today, I will tend to talk about AR as meaning optical AR. In other words, that somehow you see the real world directly through it. Maybe darkened a bit, may have diffraction gratings and other things in front of you, but you see the real world with your own eyes. And that's basically what Meta Orion is doing. It's an optical AR. And then, of course, the classic, or at least the latest classic pass-through mixed reality headset is the Apple Vision Pro, where you have cameras looking at the real world and then trying to make and then those cameras then feed displays. So they're basically VR glasses that have camera pass-through. And I always say that it makes a difference whether you're trying to, is the real world the most important thing to you? Then, in my opinion, generally AR or optical is best. Whereas if the virtual world is most important to you, then maybe it would be, then the pass-through has the advantage that the display, you got a good black and whatnot like that.
So I've come across a good term for what you're describing. We call it transmissive AR. So there's transmission from the real world coming into your eyes.
Yeah.
At the other end of this immersion scale are devices like the Meta Ray-Ban glasses. Jerry, how do you kind of think through how these fit into the picture?
Yeah, it's an interesting compromise for the Ray-Ban glasses. So there is no display tech on them. It's basically a camera with audio feedback, which has some interesting virtues to it. Nominally a lower cost device, lighter weight, perhaps a little bit more relatable to folks, something they don't have to necessarily learn. It's going to be familiar. However, I think it does limit some of the uses that are possible with just only having audio and cameras. And it's kind of interesting watching what Meta thinks is the killer app for those glasses, and we're seeing it show up in their latest offering as well. So I'm looking forward to talking about, what's the killer apps.
Yeah, yeah. On the spectrum of devices, Brett, anything you want to add here?
No, I think this pretty much covers it. Like, I think obviously, as I said in my intro, like I'm a very VR focused person, but I even think like VR only is pretty much dead actually for the most part. Everything that is VR is basically transitioning to this MR thing. So I think everything else encompasses pretty well at this point.
So let's talk maybe about Snap's offering first, their announcement recently, and then we'll move on to Meta, and we'll talk through some of the other strategic and use case examples as well from there. But let's sort of talk about what it is that they introduced, and maybe talking not just about what they are, but also kind of what they are not. Starting with the Spectacles 5, what did Snap announce? Maybe, David, you can walk us through what that announcement was, and what are some of the notable inclusions or advancements that the Spectacles 5 has versus its predecessor?
So first and foremost, I'm pretty optics centric, and so the biggest thing to me was the introduction of, and I'm just going to call them the wave optics waveguides that were existing, and incorporate them into that form factor. It helped, with their, they have the 18 cycles per degree and the 46 degree field of view. And I think that was they went from looking like a Vuzix to something more bigger, more desirable. I think that was probably the biggest advancement that I could tell. Having the two processors obviously helps, especially given their content that they're trying to deliver. And of course, that's going to eat the battery, right? But it's not an advancement, but double the weight was interesting. Tells you that they're really packing a lot of hardware in there. The size is okay. I don't know. Maybe I feel more Carl at this moment where I'm just going to detract than add. But yeah, it's a lot of it, from what I can tell, is just bigger, faster, stronger.
Yeah, another thing they did is I found interesting is they went from DLP, which was they did in their first unit, to LCOS. And I famous many years back when they were in 2021 when they were bought by Snap, I wrote on my blog I thought they were going to be using LCOS in the spectacles, and it took them another 3 years to catch up to what they said. So I guess I was, but I knew that Wave Optics it was in the process of moving to LCOS for their optics engines, and it took them, like I say, it took them 3 years after they were acquired before that actually happened, even though it looked like Wave Optics in 2021 was on the verge of switching to LCOS. That's me. I tend to look at what's the optical engine and what's the nitty gritty internal guts more than the optics and displays is what I tend to focus on.
For me, when I put on the Spectacles 5, honestly, it's been long enough since I had tried on the Spectacles 4 that I kind of forgot what the Spectacles 4 was all about. But a week or so after I had a chance to try the demo from Snap, I got a chance to go to the actual developer conference, the Snap Partner Summit, and somebody who was sitting next to me, the Spectacles 4. I put those devices on. I thought, oh my gosh, these are so much smaller and lighter by comparison to these Spectacles 5. Like, it is double the weight because of where the weight sits on your body, like on your head, on your nose, and your ears. It's definitely noticeable. And it suddenly went from being in a class of devices that's kind of in that, what was it before, 120, 130 grams-ish previously, to this 230-gram device. Definitely beefed up. It's now in the same class as the Magic Leap 2. Magic Leap 2 has all of this extra contraption to hold it to your head, to kind of split and divide and support that weight, and the Spectacles is just glasses.
Maybe that's why it has a 45-minute battery life.
I'm sure that's a contributing factor. You don't feel as much. They did it, but the ergonomics on the device, the industrial design on that Spectacles 5 is actually pretty spectacular, given how big it is, in my opinion.
I suspect that 45-minute runtime is part of the driving factor of this over 200 gram weight as well. So it's it's just all these trade-offs of jamming, batteries in and processors versus, comfort. Always.
I thought it was pretty, like, coming from the VR side, like, I thought it was interesting how they, in their keynote, put such a focus of like, hey, this is not a big bulky VR headset. But like, I think when you start getting to that weight territory, you start getting the probability where like, if you do like a split architecture, you can almost do like a mixed reality headset, like at that weight on your head. And it's like, well, what is Snap really getting out of doing a transparent AR with that kind of weight? And like, what is their long-term plan for this zip kit? Basically, is what I'm
Well,
trying to figure out.
And that's interesting that you brought that up because I was thinking about this. Is their pricing model, right? I found that to be very interesting, right? Where you pay month by month, and then it ends up being a lot at the end of a year.
Yeah. Well, they're not selling to consumers. That pricing model is specifically to help them justify the support they're providing to the developer community.
Right.
They're offering it to. So it's a
Right. I feel, it kind of goes in line with their desires as a social media company. And, I'm not a Snapchat expert at all, but it feels like a company that's plateaued quite a few years ago as far as, growth in that space. And they're still kind of trudging along with, kind of out in the world, social media kind of things. And you can kind of feel it in their, in the spectacles that's the direction I think they're heading. It's going to be a long uphill battle. That's, in some ways, maybe they could have doubled down on their camera only offerings, and came up with more killer apps for that and had more adoption. But again, you said this is for developers, so this is a peek into the future of the direction they're going.
right. Yeah. So let's talk just for a second more about the hardware itself, and then we'll kind of bubble back to some of these more strategic implications. But on the hardware, I know, Carl, that you love to talk about displays, and optics generally. And you had some insights, and we'll come back to some of those insights as it relates to Meta because there are some commonalities there. But one of the things that I noted and appreciated about the Spectacles 5 is that it was actually useful outside. I don't know that I've ever tried on a pair of AR glasses that I could take outside into the blazing, bright, hot California summer sunny day and actually see any content at all. And part of the way they solve for that is that they didn't necessarily make the display absurdly bright. They made the environment in which I was looking at the display much dimmer, made the room darker for me by actually incorporating dimming into the lenses.
Yeah. Well, they've added a dimming layer. I think there's also a dimming layer in the Meta Orions as well. Although they haven't heard it clearly, I have indications from videos I've seen and from their teardown, their own kind of exploded view of their device. It looks like they've got probably an LCD shutter in there. LCD shutters work by doing polarized light. Like if I was wearing them, one of the first things I would start looking at is trying to find a computer monitor or something LCD to see if it worked well or not, because generally LCD shutters work based on polarized light. They have a polarizer and then a cross polarizer, and then they use the liquid crystal in the middle to undo the crossing, or to cross it, either way, but to do the dimming. LCD is the cheapest way to go. It's relatively fast switching. It's got all those nice characteristics, and it blocks. It can block like 1,000 to 1 if you want. So it's very good at dimming, but it has these other desirable characteristics. Like when you use an LCD shutter, your very first step is you're going to lose about 60% of your light. When you do that LCD shutter configuration, usually 60% of the real world light is gone in the beginning. So when you're indoors, you've now dimmed indoors also by 60%. So that's the downside of that. And that's the same way the Magic Leap 2, they used a pixelated LCD shutter so they could do, they call soft edge occlusion. Because of the physics of the way light works and all, you can't put an LCD out here in dim pixels. When you put the LCD in front of the waveguide, all you're doing is dimming a blurry area of pixels. And then, like I say, but I think that's typically AR glasses, the problem you have is the real world outside is can be as much as Well, concrete and sunlight can be 6 to 10,000 nits. And if you're only putting 200 nits to the eye, you're not going to see anything. Even at 1,000 nits, you have a hard time, start to have a hard time seeing clearly. So I always say you want probably a 1 or 2 for an outdoor headset, even with dimming, you probably want a couple of thousand nits to the eye, just so you have something to play with. So you don't have to totally darken things. Because even in the real world, the dynamic range outside in sunlight is huge, because something could be in shadow and something could be in full sunlight. And so you don't want to do too much dimming, or it becomes, otherwise if you go into shadow, then everything's gone black on you and stuff. So you kind of gotta find the balance. So you need enough
It's
light.
like that's a good argument for a pixelated occluder, you know.
The pixelated occluder, yeah, but the problem is the pixel, it's only, as they say, soft edge. It only works soft edge. You would like to have that, but then of course that's more complicated, and then that's other problems. It also adds diffraction. That's something that they've seen with the Magic Leap 2, that you start putting this other grid up there and you get other bad visual effects. Magic Leap, as I wrote on my blog, appeared to be doing work to avoid that. But yeah, it's a hard problem. There are dimmers out there. There's a couple of companies. Flex Enable's one I've talked about on the blog, and there's a couple other companies that have done it, who are doing non-polarized dimmers. Now they don't get you the dimming range. They maybe be 5x, but that's probably all you need. You probably, if I could get 5x with no polarization, I'd take it any day over a polarizing dimmer. Now these things are still going to lose some light, maybe 10-20%, but that's in the range. If you have 20% less light, you can hardly notice it. You got to kind of be halves. You got to be binary numbers. So you got to cut light in half for it to be really noticeable much to the user. So if you can go down to 20%, now you're in a range where it's not clear, but it's getting pretty close to clear.
Real quick, I want to just chime in on the localized dimming. I think while it's been marketed as, you could see the image better, from my experience, what it actually helped with was color. And so it makes the colors pop because you're not mixing the colors as much. So for localized dimming, I think that's the better reason for it. The one thing I must say though, while it's darker, and like you said, you have to have that standing polarizer to start. It makes nighttime use harder. Yeah. So if you are using this at night, it's like wearing sunglasses at night. So I do. Yeah, while it's
flip up occluders,
right? I mean, you're already wearing this thing on your head. So anyways, I just wanted to chime in on that.
We had lots of debates at Valve about occluders. It was just a hot topic because we actually just had to build one, because there was just people were wringing their hands about the vignetting around the pixels, like how bad. And of course, everyone wants perfection, so you could just carve out light from every ray angle coming into your eyes perfectly, which there's no material that can do that. But yeah, it's a fairly decent compromise with the caveats that, Carl mentioned, of now you introduce diffraction and all kinds of, loss of light.
Yeah, it's kind of a tough trade-off, but I think anything that's going to be outdoors is going to need some kind of dimming. The problem is you can win, like if you have 10, and as he said, generally, yeah, as David said, I always think about 2-to-1 contrast ratio. You have to be at least as bright as the outdoors to kind of have text be reasonably readable. But if you want to have colors look like the colors they're supposed to be, you need more like 8-to-1. Well, if you're outside and you're looking at concrete and it's 10,000 nits, you don't want to be blasting 80,000 nits. First of all, that's a real problem to generate, but you don't want to be blasting 80,000 nits at the eyes. It's going to make them sore.
So your optometrist is going to wonder why you have your home screen burned into your retina when you come into your eye exam.
By the way, that's another point on all these AR headsets too that I like to make, is that AR is probably not the way to go for watching television. I always say, a display carries this black with it. So when you look at it, when I turn the display off, it gets pretty darn black. Even an LCD, which are considered not as black as OLEDs or whatnot, but it gets pretty darn black. Whereas with a see-through display, hey, black is whatever you're looking at right now. That's your black, and you have to win by dominating over it. And once again, if you put you can put a shutter up there and block the real world out, but now what's your point? And that's another big point. That's something I always keep coming back to. What are you trying to do? What's the application? What problem are you trying to solve? And are you solving it well? Because this will get us to a subject I'd like to maybe table for later is, talking about field of view and stuff like that. Because I think people get a little too, particularly in the AR space, or have been badly influenced by the VR people, that field of view is everything.
So to speak to that and talking about Snap, come back a little bit. Something I've thought about is, why is Snap making these? What is it? And the assumption I came to is the fact that they want a way to show their content. However, the phone market is oversaturated, so they felt like this was a hardware play to have a way to display their content. Now, how that will work out, I think I know, but I don't want to say.
So it's creating a new ecosystem under their name, basically.
Essentially.
Yeah, that's what everyone's doing. Like, everyone's so obsessed with recreating the App Store, like from Apple, and it's just like, I don't know. I in the VR sphere, I see so many companies trying to do it. Even Meta, like, is still struggling so hard. Of like, Zuck missed the mobile phone craze, and he's just billions of dollars just to get a piece of that. And it was like Norm from Tested was talking about on the Voices of VR podcast, how they were in the room with Zuckerberg and they were just complaining so much about how with the Meta Ray-Bans, they can't access the functionality of like the like airdrop, the automatic airdrop, to get the pictures and photos off the glasses like seamlessly. They have to do this convoluted process of like making the glasses go into hotspot mode and everything. And it just, yeah, I mean, it really sucks actually for anyone who wants to make like a very cohesive product that works with everything, because you have to rely on these giants right now. But at the same time, you also have these companies trying to do the same monopolistic tactics that basically they're complaining about too. So it's a mess.
Yeah, I'm always suspicious of social media companies and their intentions for putting sensors all over my body. Facebook's been in trouble multiple times for abusing various aspects of our lives to target ads or do other things. And I'm sure there's a bit of motivation there. It's like, yeah, if we could just digitize your life, then we can sell better advertisement to you.
Do you think, Jerry, that the Spectacles 5 represents a device that developers will eagerly play with?
Yeah, it's interesting. I often think about the little echo chamber that we're all in. Like, I imagine most of the people are going to listen to your podcast. Every time there's a new device, they start cheering up and down because, yay, there's some new toy. And yeah, I think there's probably going to be some adoption and some utility is going to come out of it, because there's just some things that that device is going to do better than other devices. The big question is, can any of those developers identify a clear path to the killer app that can go beyond our little bubble that we live in? We struggle with that with our product all the time. Like, we can do some things really well, but what is it that's going to really break it open to hundreds of millions of people?
So that's a good point, and it reminded me of something that I've speculated on and have stated before. People talk about this replacing your phone or whatever, right? Like, Snap's got the cameras, you can take pictures of your friends, et cetera, blah, blah, blah. But you have to carry this device around with you. What are you going to do with it when you don't have it on your face, right? So you can fold it and you can put it in your pocket. I never put my glasses in my pocket, right? Like, a phone is pretty ubiquitous because you can take it and you can put it down on a flat surface. You can put it in your pocket. It's pretty flat, where glasses are very much more three-dimensional. And so, yeah, it's interesting.
I think Humane AI, Rabbit, R1 are interesting things to look at in conjunction. I was alluding to Meta's plans with Ray-Ban and their current offering. There's this big AI craze, and there's a lot of people grandstanding that it's going to replace your phone. We saw the first belly flops with Humane AI and Rabbit.
Go back to, but look at Google Glass and whatnot. Yeah, that was going to be the big old thing. it's funny how the media, and I guess I'm part of the media now with my blog, but it's funny how the media just goes, they were all agog over the Apple Vision Pro, and then they turn around and now they're all agog about the Meta Orion. And it's kind of like, well, I guess, it played out, but we saw what happened. I mean, Apple Vision Pro had about 2 weeks of hot news, and then everyone said, that's it. You haven't heard hardly anything about it since. And
well, that's because everybody returned them.
Oh, ouch.
everybody didn't. I still have one.
Well, they drove their Cybertruck down the road with them and got their clicks and revenue from it. So win.
Now, there were a whole bunch of the influencer types who just bought them for the 2 weeks in return. I never do stuff like that. So,
You know what's funny is Jerry's like 20 minutes from me, and yes, that's exactly right. The Cybertruck.
yeah. Okay.
So
Cloud
what-
chasers. I really just a quick note on Google Glass because Carl brought it up, and I may be the contrarian with everyone in the universe. I liked Google Glass when it came out. The concept of it, I thought it was just marketed poorly and came in at the wrong price point. I thought there could be some real utility in that if it was like a $99 device you could slap on your face, and you could do mental gymnastics to see how Google could do something like that, like simplify it, subsidize it a little bit, make it just like, like something you put in your pocket protector, nerds, and
Yeah.
bring it out and use it.
So
Yeah.
from what I understand was that price point came in largely due to the fact that they had to spin up Himax to be able to create a line for that panel.
Mhm.
Which is, I will tell you, people balk when I'm like, yeah, it's going to cost $1.5 million to do. And they're like, wait, what? It's like, this is what you want to do. This would cost.
Sounds cheap, actually. From what my experience is, it is, ramping up manufacturing some. And that's the problem for this thing. I've always said is that ramping up the ecosystem. People think of me as an optics person for some reason, but I'm really an old silicon jock. I designed CPUs for a living for 20 years. And, so I'm more into the semiconductor thing. And, we wouldn't even do a design, no less build a fab or try to build a process around something unless it had like millions of units. Like right off the bat, we expect, when you build a chip, we're going to ship millions of these suckers. And if you're not even going to put in the design effort, no less customizing your fab. No fab would touch it. Something for 1 million units. It's just not a thing. By the way, we spoke poorly about the Apple Vision Pro, but we do have one person in our audience or in our panel who uses an Apple Vision Pro every day. So, right, David? Right, Brad?
Yeah, I think I should preface this for people who don't know me. So, like, one reason I think that Carl likes to talk to me is even though I'm like VR's cheerleader in a lot of ways, I'm also very controversial in my own VR bubble because I'm also the most cynic. Like, I'm someone who loves it and uses it every day, but I'm like, also, this is never going to take off. That's how I've always kind of been with this publicly. And I'm kind of the same way with Vision Pro. I'm like, this is the most wonderful piece of hardware I've gotten from VR, like ever. I love it. I use it every day. I replace my monitor with it. And then I'm like, I don't expect anyone else to do this. Like, that's just the reality of it. But yeah, I do love the device and everything it's kind of doing. Yeah.
Yeah, you were I remember you used to call all the time with it on, and now you say you stopped doing that, right?
I do it mostly for private calls. I did one actually today for work. When I'm working and like talking to my coworkers on Zoom call because they're actually abroad. I still do it for that, but out of pure respect for like people like you and like this group chat, I'm not gonna do my 3D generated avatar. It just seems disrespectful, Yeah. So
Yeah, people think
The question of the hour, though, is do you use it in your Cybertruck?
no, I don't have. I bought a Vision Pro, so I don't have enough money to buy a Cybertruck.
All right.
And that's actually an interesting question, even for the see-through AR stuff. Is would you use it in a truck? And I'm not sure you would. A lot of this stuff is maybe not appropriate, particularly something that could pop up a display and block your vision or something. That's one of the big issues, is it become a distraction and whatnot. But
Yeah.
there's no way in heck you're going to do that with a pass-through AR.